Hi and welcome to my automotive video. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about control arms. Only time people have ever heard of control arms is if they've had a problem with their suspension, usually after a car accident or someone hitting a large pothole or hitting a curb or something like that. Occasionally you can detect that you have a bad control arm or control arm bushing, as I did. Well, I'll be driving down the road, not, for a few minutes. I hit my brakes maybe a little harder than normal. I could feel my car dip a little bit to the right, And I said, wow, what's going on here? Anytime you hit your brakes, you're not supposed to feel your car do a little jerking motion. And that was happening again and again. So I inquired with a couple of friends. They said, well, you may have a bad control arm. I seen some stuff on the website about it. So I jacked my car up, put it on jack stands where it was safe, and I grabbed the tire at the 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock position, and I tried to shake it back and forth as if I was trying to wiggle a tire off, and sure enough, it did have a little wiggle. That stuff's supposed to be solid as a rock. It's not supposed to wiggle. You can also grab the tire at the bottom and at the top and try to wiggle and see if anything happens there. And on this car, nothing happened at the 6 and 12 o'clock position, but something did happen at the 3 and 9 o'clock position. So I decided to look a little closer. When I looked behind the wheel and wiggled, I seen a little bit of movement at the bushings. Now my control arms on my car, which is similar to most, they have a connection at the bottom of the strut, and this control arm keeps the strut in position, and then it had two connections on the frame of the car. Now if you take and snatch a control arm off a car, or if a control arm fell off a car, which won't happen while it's driving, your wheel would not be attached at the bottom. The top of the strut assembly is in the frame of the car, the top of the car. When you open the hood, you can see that part, and the bottom of it is connected to the car by the control arm. If you unfortunately have a control arm that goes very bad and it's in a position called a ball joint, if a ball joint falls out, your wheel can actually fall from under the car. I've only seen that happen in a couple rare cases, but these people ignore the warning signs. So this is what a control arm looks like. This is actually a used control arm off of a Volvo 850. It will normally sit in a car like this. These two portions of it connect to the frame, and this portion of it connects to the bottom of the strut assembly. Now this has a pivot on it. It's kind of like a joint. It's called a ball joint, and it helps, when the struts and stuff are moving around and bouncing up and down, it helps it vibrate and bounce up and down and not be just a rigid piece that could break off. Now this one actually has a removable ball joint, so I could take these 3 bolts out, buy only this part, and replace it with a new one, bolt it back together, and I should be good to go. That shouldn't affect my wheel alignment or anything. On this end, you have 2 rubber bushings with a bolt that attaches it to the frame. Now these bushings are rubber. I've seen people actually get these professionally replaced, pressed out, and put polyurethane bushings in there. Like these bushings, they're nice and soft and pliable. They'll probably last maybe 10 years. I've seen people put polyurethane bushings in there that are stiffer and more rigid that may last 20 or 30 years. But some people like the softer ride, so they go with the OEM rubber style bushings. And then your ball joint here has a joint in it, so you want to make sure that that's not very loose. Now I could move this back and forth with my hands. If I would shake it and it would move, this thing would definitely need to be replaced. But it's got a rubber seal around the joint, so it's still holding, I assume, grease inside there. This is a good used item. Now the one I pulled off the car, when I hit my brakes, I actually felt the car dip a little bit. This one, on the forward side, the bushing was actually so worn that it fell out of the control arm when I took it off. Now the back side, it's still very tight. It still functioning the way it's supposed to, but just this little bit of slack in this bushing made my car dip just a little bit to one side. Now when I look at the ball joint is looser. I could move it easier than I could this other unit, but it was still serviceable. So now occasionally, if someone has an accident or something, they may actually bend this item on the car, and most cars have larger control arms. But the longer that part is, the thicker the steel has to be, the heavier it's going to be. And these are just very thick units. You can get an aftermarket unit like this for probably $45, $55. Has the new bushings and ball joint in it. You can get the one at the dealer at Volvo. This unit's $150. So now I've heard people say that the one that Volvo sells lasts longer, and I don't know how old this one is, but it's not original, and it does need a bushing in it. So there you have it. This is a control arm, part of the suspension system. Helps you keep your car stable. If you're a do-it-yourselfer and you replace one of these yourself, it might take a half hour beyond taking a wheel and tire off the car. You can put polyurethane bushings in there. They'll normally have to be pressed, and usually in the manual, when I read the manual, these bushings are pressed in. You can press it in little to the right or little to the left or dead center. The manual suggests that you try to get the bushings positioned the way they are when they're taken off the car. That way the wheel alignment will be close to correct. But if you replace these things, I suggest that you get a wheel alignment. That way you don't have uneven tire wear on your car. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit about control arms.